Okay, super quick. Think of a payments company. The first name that comes to mind. Now, if we're being honest, a lot of us probably thought of Square. Now, Square has taken the payments world by storm with their modern, sleek terminals and their hip with the times branding. But the defining quality of Square, the one that we care about, is their pricing. They famously charge a flat rate for all their fees. Now, if you don't know what that is, that's okay. We'll explain this later. But here's a thing that you should know. Flat rate pricing has a reputation for being bad for growing businesses.
Because they see that they have simplified pricing.
And if anyone was gonna come up to me and ask me what they should do just getting started out, I would always tell them to just start with Square.
Being in the payments industry, we hear this narrative all the time. If your business grows past a certain point, then you'll inevitably overpay by thousands of dollars a year because of flat rate pricing. In a way, it's like the sweater you bought for your 5-year-old that no longer fits when she's 10. The thing we all want to know is this really true? And that's what we're going to find out today. But I'll warn you, things are going to get messy because flat rate pricing does seem to work for some businesses. There's a reason why so many businesses continue to flock to companies like Square when first setting up their payments. And so to keep us on track, we're going to focus in on this question. Is flat rate still right for my business? Or is it time to look for another model? With any luck, by the end of this video, we'll see if there is indeed a distinct point where that flat rate sweater stretches beyond its limits and ultimately tears. But before we do that, let's back up for a second. Business owners don't care about theoretical models or projections. They care about cutting costs. And what's the one cost that always seems to be there regardless of what type of business you run? It's transaction fees. Get this, in 2025, a study done by Merchant Payments Coalition found that over $198 billion were collected in fees just on credit and debit payments. That's more than the GDP of Morocco. Why is so much money being taken just to accept this piece of plastic? Let's trace it all the way back to the point of payment. Pete, tell me, what happens when you tap a card on this terminal?
In my bank card is the information of my bank account and my bank. So either my debit card, MasterCard, my Visa. So I come through, I see that, I tap, and there's a pause.
The terminal is going to read the data on the card. And then what's going to do is it's going to send it to the customer's issuing bank that they have their card with. That bank is going to check the details of that card.
The bank says yes or no, you do have the money to pay for this, you are using a card that is you.
And then send us a response.
And then that information comes back and it tells the terminal this transaction is approved by the financial systems. And then you get the magic noise, bing, and you get to take your stuff.
I read the other day that over like $198 billion were collected in fees in the US just from these types of payments. Like, why is there so much money being handed over just in that payment process?
Most of it stems from the credit card companies. So the credit card companies charge a fee for the privilege of using their service.
So like Visa, for example, will charge a fee for these transactions. The banks take a fee, and then of course we have our fees on top of that as well. So all of that kind of gets rolled into all of this part of the transaction process.
Point is, there's actually a lot of middlemen propping up the entire payment process. And these middlemen aren't just doing it out of the goodness of their hearts, they want to be paid. And so each time a card is tapped, it's not just your customer paying you, you're paying the banks and the card networks for making the whole thing happen. The rewards points, the travel miles, the infrastructure, that's all being funded by your fees. But wait, there's more. That payments company that's supplying you with your card reader, well, they want to make some extra money too. And so when they pass on those bank and network fees onto you, well, they add yet another extra layer. This is called their markup. And this brings us back to Square. And so how does Square decide how much to charge you then? Well, let's take a look at their pricing website. As you can see, under each of these plans, there's really only one rate listed here. Now, on the surface, this seems simple, but what's really happening here? So with flat rate pricing, payment companies decide your payment fees in this way. Each transaction costs the banks and the card networks a certain amount. Now, the thing to note is that these amounts differ from transaction to transaction. Some naturally just cost more than others based on the types of cards that exist out there. So the flat rate processors of the world, the Squares, they make sure that you get charged the same level amount by filling the rest of whatever space is left with their markup. This way, regardless of how much each card costs to process, they're charging you the same amount. But hold on, I almost glossed over something I said there. You see, this card has higher fees than this card. That's right, those fees that the banks and the card networks collect, they change for each card you take. On the high end, it's the Visa Infinite Privilege or MasterCard World Elite cards. These are like the Ferraris or the Bugattis of the card world. On the low end, debit cards. These are the Honda Civics of the card world. Now, why does this matter for the demonstration? Well, because the amount that the transaction actually costs, a lot of the time is much lower than what Square is charging you. Check out this chart. It's a study done by the US Federal Reserve. It shows what types of cards are commonly used by consumers across the country. You see how 58% of these cards are debit cards? These are the ones that are cheap to process. According to debit networks, the actual cost to process a debit card is about 1%. And so if Square is charging you 2.6% to accept a debit card, well then they're overcharging you by over 1.5%. So clearly something's not quite adding up here. But what's the alternative? Well, there's something called Interchange Plus pricing that distributes these beads a little bit differently. Companies like Helcim and Adyen use this model. So again, we have the costs of each transaction, which differ by card, but this time we're gonna add a fixed amount using this spoon of markup on top. So this means two things. Your fees will actually fluctuate from transaction to transaction. So for some card types, you'll pay less. For others, you'll pay more. So with this model, your processing costs are staying true to what the banks and card networks are actually charging on any given card. Now, what if I took one of these jars and filled it completely with purple beads? Well, this is where the debate between the two models begins, because if your customer comes in with a card that costs more than Square is charging on that flat rate, well then that flat rate actually prevents the cost from overfilling and spilling over the lip of the jar. Here's another way to look at it. When Square charges you a flat rate, you're essentially overpaying on the cheaper cards, like debit cards, when you don't have to. In exchange, you're getting a capped price on the more expensive cards, like premium cards. With an Interchange Plus processor though, apart from that small margin that the processor charges, you're essentially paying how much that card costs. It's like rolling the dice every time your customer shows up. Whatever card you get is what you pay. And so if you're using a flat rate processor like Square, the question you might be asking is, will I save money with this model or not? I would guess that the answer is a bit more complicated than beads in a jar. And so I thought, why not look at 3 characteristics of a business that might tip the scale between flat rate and Interchange Plus. And then that way we can do an experiment within each and find out which one wins. Each of these characteristics can be summed up by one word. We have size, mix, and volume. So apparently size matters. Your average ticket size, that is. Ever wonder why you see so many Square readers and tablets at coffee shops? Well, in theory, it's because businesses that sell lots of small items, like $5 drip coffees, well, they're supposed to be more compatible with a flat rate processor like Square. Why? Well, it has to do with heads and tails. Let me explain. Processing fees are often split into 2 halves. It has a head at the front and a tail at the end. So for example, under their free plan, Square charges 2.6% plus 15 cents for in-person transactions in the US. So the 2.6% is the head. The 15 cents is the tail. So what does this tail do? Well, it doesn't help the fee keep its balance, but it does ensure that part of it is always fixed. It's like when you mail out a piece of snail mail. You have to put a stamp on it. So every time you mail one out, it costs you the same amount, about 10 to 15 cents. The point is this: the smaller your transactions are, the more that tail portion can inflate your fees. Let me give you an example. So if you're selling a $5 coffee from a stand in Brooklyn, New York, and someone walks up and pays with a standard MasterCard, with our Interchange Plus rates here at Helcim, that tail would be 20 cents. That's already 4% of the entire sale amount, if you think about it. And we haven't even added in the head of the fee yet. Once we do, we can see that you could be paying over 6% just to sell that single cup of coffee. Now, if you were using Square, you'd still have that tail. It would just be a little bit less at 15 cents. And so instead of 6%, you'd be paying 5.6%. Still, this makes a difference though, because if you're in a busy spot and you sell 500 coffees in a day, well then you've made $2,500 in total. In fees though, you've paid $154 to that Interchange Plus model versus $140 to Square's flat rate model. In this case, Square wins. Not by much, but it does. But what if you're running a physio clinic that routinely charges $100 per session? Well, this is when things start to change. Because all of a sudden, that cents tail, the 20 cents, that's only 0.2% of the transaction amount. All of a sudden, the head portion of the fee is really what matters here. Let's say that that clinic also does $2,500 in sales a day, or 25 sessions. Well, then they'd be paying $54 with Helcim's Interchange Plus model versus $65 with Square's flat rate model. Okay, now we're starting to see Interchange Plus pull ahead. Well, what happens if we go even higher? Let's say do a $1,250 ticket, like an auto shop might do for a full brake replacement. If they do 2 of these a day to hit that $2,500 sales mark, well then they'd be paying $54.90 in fees with Helcim's Interchange Plus model versus $65 in fees again with Square's flat rate model. Once again, Interchange Plus wins. So what is this telling us? Well, it would seem that larger ticket sizes favor Interchange Plus over flat rate. And so you could say that if you're selling a lot of really small items like ice creams, coffees, or stickers, well then you might be better off sticking with Square. But there's nuances here, because if you're that same coffee shop but you also sell coffee beans, well then that could bring your average ticket size to $100 or more. And so that type of coffee shop might stand to benefit from moving away from Square. So clearly there's not really a definitive answer yet. There's a lot more that we need to look at, because so far we've only looked at a transaction with one type of card, a standard MasterCard, when in reality you could have hundreds of customers coming in every single day using all sorts of variations of credit cards. And this is where our second word comes in, mix. Mix refers to all the different card types that your business sees on a daily basis. Why is this important? Well, as we established earlier, with Interchange Plus, your fees change from transaction to transaction based on what type of card is used. And so what's the best case scenario for someone using an Interchange Plus processor if the majority of your customers used the cheaper cards? But that's not always the case. Certain industries see an influx of these types of cards. That's right, I'm talking about corporate cards. These are the cards with extended payment terms, travel insurance, and premium perks, all of which make them just as expensive to process as some of those World Elite or Infinite cards that I mentioned earlier. So to see the impact that card mix has, let's take a look at that same example from before of the physiotherapist clinic. In the first scenario, let's say that they take 60% debit cards, 35% premium rewards cards, and 5% debit cards. Then in a second scenario, let's invert that. Let's say that they take 60% corporate, 35% premium, and 5% debit. If we hold all of the other things steady, so the same sales volume and the same transaction size, well, this is what happens. With Helcim's Interchange Plus model, in that first debit-heavy scenario, you would see something like $53 in fees. That's a 2.18% effective rate. Now, going to the corporate heavy scenario, you would see something like $69 in fees, or a 2.8% effective rate. Now, in contrast, moving over to Square's flat rate, well, both scenarios would have the same amount of fees. That's because the rates are flattened. So you'd get charged something like $68 in fees, or a 2.75% effective rate. To put it simply, a simple change in card mix could result in your fees being raised by $16 in a day with that Interchange Plus model. At that point, you're essentially paying the same amount as you would with Square. We're starting to see the extremes here, and perhaps a potential weakness with Interchange Plus. Because if you're in a business that accepts 90% of their payments with corporate purchasing cards, like a wholesale distributor perhaps, well then you might not save money if you switch to this model. But hold on a second. Remember that Federal Reserve study that we mentioned earlier? The one where we saw a huge chunk of that card mix pie being debit cards? Well, our own internal data at Helcim backs this up as well. If we look at data from 10,000 processing merchants here, we can see that the most popular processing method at 67% is, you guessed it, debit cards. And so seeing all this, it suggests that a large portion of us would benefit from switching to an Interchange Plus model, where debit cards are priced lower than Square. And so what's the final piece of this equation? What would help us put all of this into perspective? Here's a metaphor. Let's say you're standing on the side of the highway watching cars go by. 30 seconds pass, and all of a sudden 3 red Ferraris zip past you. Now, if you stop then and there, you could say that 100% of the cars on the road are red Ferraris. Now, if you take a folding chair and you sit by that highway for a month, well, then there's gonna be enough other cars that drive by that make those 3 red Ferraris seem like an anomaly. The majority of the cars will be regular, like Toyota Corollas or Honda Civics. The point is, the busier the road is, the more accurate of a representation you'll get of what cars drive down that road. So relating this back to payments, here's the hypothesis. Once you reach a certain volume of transactions per month, well, then your card mix is gonna settle into a more predictable split, just like that highway. And so because most of the cards out there are going to be debit cards, then you'll save money with Interchange Plus instead of Square's flat rate. Now, to test this, I decided to compare 3 similar merchants. All of them use Helcim for their payments, but they all fall into a different level of sales. So here's what we decided to keep controlled among these 3 merchants. So all 3 of them are in the same industry. In this case, it's chiropractors. And so their average transaction sizes stay within that $40 to $60 range after insurance has already been paid out. Secondly, they're all based in the US. Now, Canadian and American interchange rates are different, and so it wouldn't be fair to compare across the border. And then the third, they all primarily process payments in person. And so they all use a physical payment terminal to take cards. This matters because online and keyed-in transactions just cost more in general. And so we want a level playing field for this experiment. Now, here's where the chiropractors differ. The first one does $2,000 a month in sales. The second one does $13,000 a month in sales. And the third one, $50,000 a month in sales. So I gathered data on how much each of these businesses was paying a month in fees. And what I found was unexpected. You see, over a 6-month period, all 3 businesses appeared to be paying less in fees with Interchange Plus than they would have with Square. Now, what I expected to see was some sort of clear break-even point, where one of the businesses would exceed a certain sales volume, and therefore their fees would dip down below Square's benchmark. But that's not what happened at all. All 3 of the businesses are sitting comfortably below the lines on the chart that represent Square's. In fact, the lowest rate recorded was 2% in March of 2026, and this was from the clinic that was doing $13,000 a month in sales. It's not exactly high volume. And so what did change with higher monthly volumes then? Well, if we look closely at the graph, we can see that the business with the highest volume had the most stable interchange rate. And so while the other 2 clinics had rates that fluctuated from 2.5% to 2%, this third clinic, the one that processed 50 grand a month, their rates hovered at around 2.16%. And it's pretty steady. So perhaps we were onto something with our initial hypothesis. We just weren't looking at the right variable. Remember, we had anticipated that higher volume businesses would have a more stable card mix. And this turned out to be true. Check out these graphs that show the differences in credit versus debit percentages over those 6 months. For the smallest volume business, you can see that the line varies greatly. It crosses over each other, it swings back and forth, whereas the highest volume chiropractor, this line stays at a pretty similar distance apart the entire time. So our busy highway analogy worked. It just resulted in rate stability, not just a rate discount. Now, I wanted to make sure that these results didn't just apply to chiropractor clinics. And so I replicated the experiment across a few other industries as well. But I do notice that the lines look a lot more jagged here, but one thing still remains. The highest volume auto shop does have the smoothest looking line. Now, in terms of vet clinics, this one is a little different. For the first time, we see that one of these vet clinics had rates in a month that actually exceeded Square's flat rate. But there's an explanation for this. So in this month, this clinic only took 2 transactions. And both those transactions were paid with by, you guessed it, premium cards. But putting that aside, we are seeing a trend here. It would seem that the highest volume businesses have the smoothest month-to-month rates. And so after all the investigation, after running all the numbers, what can we say about comparing a flat rate processor with an Interchange Plus one? So the first conclusion is that really small ticket sizes aren't compatible with Interchange Plus. So we saw this in that coffee shop example. If the majority of your transactions are in single-digit dollar amounts, like a $5 snow cone, for example, well then that tail portion of your interchange fees starts to eat up any of the savings that you would have gotten from the model. Number two is that card mixes seem to affect your month-to-month savings with Interchange Plus more than your sales volumes. And so our original assumption of high volume businesses succeed with Interchange Plus is a little bit oversimplified, because as we saw in a few of our examples, if more of your customers are using premium or corporate cards, well, that tends to raise your rates more than the volume itself. Now, this segues nicely into the third conclusion, which is that higher volume businesses do appear to have more stable savings with Interchange Plus. And so volume does matter, because the more and more transactions that you see every month, the more stable your card mix is, which means the more predictable your month-to-month processing rate becomes. Now, what's ultimately clear is that we saw very few examples today of flat rate beating out Interchange Plus. And maybe there's a bit of selection bias here, but even the less than ideal businesses that we looked at, like the $2,000 a month chiropractor, they still managed to pay less with Interchange Plus than with Square's flat rate. But wait, this doesn't answer the original question. It just points in the direction of an answer, right? Because we were wondering, how do I know my business is going to save with an Interchange Plus processor? Well, the answer, at least for now, is most likely. We don't know for sure. And that's not a cop-out answer, I swear. It's just like ordering a sweater online. You could look at the listed size, but you're not gonna know if it actually fits until you receive it in the mail and put it on for yourself. And the same goes for payment processors. To definitively know whether a certain pricing model is gonna save you money, well, you have to do the math yourself. That's right, you have to look at your average ticket sizes, your card mixes, and your monthly volume to estimate what your effective rate would be with any given model. Well, luckily we've made this easier on you with our free statement comparison tool. So instead of putting all your numbers from a statement into a spreadsheet, you can just punch them into this free tool instead. So you can find this on our website. Just enter your numbers from your statement, adjust a few levers so that it looks like your business, and then it'll spit out an effective rate which helps you compare our Interchange Plus model with any other model that's out there. This is a much quicker way to decide whether or not staying with a processor like Square is worth it for you. And so if you want to give this a try, check out the link in the description below. Here's the thing, the payments industry is never black and white. We've seen this multiple times in this video already. Some Interchange Plus processors will also charge hidden or monthly fees, effectively erasing any savings you could have gotten from changing to that model. On the flip side, some flat rate processors also offer custom rates to businesses that have grown to a certain point. Not all processors are built the same, and not all merchants are built the same, just like sweaters. And so maybe the conclusion isn't to write off Square or any other payment processor based on how it looks on someone else. It's about finding the payment processor that fits you the best, and that's often not the one that's handed down to you. Does that analogy make sense anymore? I don't know, I feel like it's hanging on by a thread. Anyways, this was Victor from Helcim, and I'll see you next time.
Where did this coffee cup go? Yeah.
My hair will be different. Cool. That was again awesome. Yeah, very insightful.
Opinionated, maybe, but
That's fine. That's
is
what
that
we
a hot
want.
take? Does that count as a hot take?
That's what our brand is now. we want to ruffle some feathers.
Only hot takes over here in this area.